I want to start out with the billionaire coup, how the Supreme Court and corporate money captured America. This is, our elections, our media. Basically, well, in fact, the article opens with this quote from Frederick Bastiat. This is from 1848, Economic Sophisms. He writes, and this is just so perfectly said. He writes, when plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. And that's exactly what's happening. I mean, there's so little pushback right now, at least among Republicans, to Hegseth's murders in the Caribbean. And this is at the top of the news again. We're seeing that, these two guys were hanging on to basically a piece of, a fragment of the boat, a piece of flotsam in the ocean, and waving at the plane like, hey, rescue us. And so Hegseth orders that they be killed. I mean, this is wild stuff. And then you look at ICE's cruelty and violence, and now ICE is buying spy equipment to target protesters against ICE and anybody on social media who has spoken out against ICE. And you look at all this stuff, and what is it? Well, it's the fulfillment of a 50-year plan. It's a plan that was put into place in 1971 by Lewis Powell. It was called the Powell Memo. The following year, in 72, Richard Nixon put him on the Supreme Court. In 1978, Lewis Powell authored a decision, a Supreme Court decision called First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti, sometimes referred to as Boston v. Bellotti or just Bellotti. Frank Bellotti was the Attorney General for the state of Massachusetts at the time. And in that decision, Lewis Powell, kind of fulfilling his own Powell Memo, said that not only is money the same thing as speech and therefore protected by the First Amendment of the United States, but that corporations are persons. In other words, he doubled down on the 1886 theft of corporate personhood, which really opened the door for all this stuff. And so here we are. As a result of those decisions, and then, like I said, Citizens United just, tripled down on it. Here we are now with, billionaires and oligarchs basically running our country, running our politics, and giant corporations as well, owning our politicians. And with Trump playing strongman, it's kind of looking like Russia in the early 2000s. Where you've got the government now trying to control the corporations. And in fact, Trump has directed our government to buy significant share chunks in multiple corporations now, which is what that's communism, right? The government owns the companies, the private enterprise. But, what we see right now is that basically every crisis we're facing is the result of billionaires and big corporations being able to own our politics. Our housing crisis, $2 trillion in student debt, homelessness, our drug epidemic, our slow response to the climate emergency, this looming crisis for Social Security and Medicare, the ongoing brutality of ICE, even the lack of affordable drugs, insurance, and health care. All of this stuff, none of this stuff would exist, none of these problems would exist if our politicians were doing what we, the people, want them to do, according to pretty much every survey in the last 20 or 30 years. All the polling shows that the majority of people want student debt to go away. They want, basically free college education or very low-cost college education like we had before the Reagan Revolution. That they want a response to the climate emergency and that they want to green the power systems of America, if for no other reason than just, hundreds of thousands of people die every year just from the pollution caused by tailpipes and power plants. They want our housing crisis resolved, and they don't want Wall Street buying up every fifth house in America, and they don't want foreigners owning homes and then keeping them empty as investment properties. I mean, we right now have more empty houses in America than we have homeless people. And Americans do want affordable drugs and a national health care system. None of that stuff is and Americans increasingly are, upset about the brutality of ICE. All of this stuff is happening because the billionaires and the big corporations want it and profit from it, and the changes that I just talked about, the things that people actually want, are not happening. And this all tracks back to a corrupt Supreme Court. You've got Clarence Thomas and his wife taking millions in what could be characterized as bribes. You know, luxury travel, tuition for his son, a home for his mother. Sam Alito on the gravy train. How did Brett Kavanaugh pay off his credit cards and gambling debt? John Roberts' wife has reportedly made over $10 million from law firms with business before the court. Neil Gorsuch got a sweetheart real estate deal. Amy Coney Barrett has refused to recuse herself from cases involving her own father's oil company. I mean, none of this is illegal now because when they legalized bribery with Citizens United, they legalized their own behavior. So, you know, here we are. This is a crisis moment, in my opinion, in American history. And we need to be standing up, speaking out, getting ready for the 2026 election, making sure everybody we know is registered to vote. Sign up with indivisible.org and other good nonprofit organizations that are doing the work. Get inside the Democratic Party, participate. We got to fight.